Hi everyone, it's Peter Zalum's Griniflix Adventurate and welcome to another video. Okay, well today we're talking medium format, and that is a digital back that is compatible and can fit onto the Hasselblad 503CW, and this is the CFV 50C. There's the sensor. It's a crop sensor as opposed to 60 by 60 millimeters. That just goes on. And you can see now, and it's got a battery here. Now my reference camera is going to be my trusty Leica M11, which is 60 megapixel file. It is a full frame format, 24 by 36 millimeter. And also I know this particular lens, the 15 millimeter Summilux, is a top lens. Okay, so I've done a little bit of trial and error testing with this digital back, and I will take it out in the field and see what sort of results we can get. Now, what I'm hoping to do is get some really good images and see how this lens performs to give me some reference point, how good or how bad this lens is, or this whole setup, this 50 megapixel system, larger format. There is more surface area by which to capture the image and a large sensor. The 50 millimeters focal length will be very similar to the focal length of the Hasselblad. Now the Hasselblad has got an 80mm f2.8 lens on it, which if you're shooting the 60mm film by 60mm film, that would be equivalent to about 50mm focal length. However, because it's a crop sensor, it works out to be around the 60mm mark. So it's pretty close, but anyway, that will be our comparison. So when we go into Lightroom and have a look at these shots that I'll be taking in great detail, that will be my reference point. Going to go out to McMaster's Beach, into the forests around there, take some shots also on the beach, and we'll have some interesting shots to compare. Right, well I think I found a location. It's amazing when you're walking around, you really sort of you work up a sweat. I've got a number of subjects around here. I just need to work out what I'm going to photograph. We've got nice lighting and fairly consistent lighting as well around here. Yeah, so being a landscape photographer is not easy. One of my favorite landscape photographers that I follow on YouTube is Thomas Heaton, and there'll be a link there to his channel. Always inspired by his locations and what appears to be nothing, and all of a sudden he frames it up and it's got a brilliant shot. All right, well, I won't try and emulate his performance, but I will try and just find something and photograph it. Needless to say, there's lots around the place, just got to work out how to frame it. All right, I'll go find something. Looks about right. I've got three cameras. I've got the Hasselblad, I've got the Leica M11, and I thought I'd just also pull out my Z6 with the 50mm f1.2 Nikon lens, Z mount lens. So we'll set up the shot with this, and then we'll replicate everything with everything else. Get all the right exposures first with this, and then we'll go from there. And we're focused on the trunk there. Let's do the same shot with the M11. Okay, 2-second delay, and we'll take the shot. Okay, so we'll do the same process with the Hasselblad. Day 2. Yes, I had to go back to get the memory card. Yes, you need to check. Do you have a memory card? Anyway, so I got it. Took some shots around McMaster's Beach. Let's see what they turned out like. Well, the shoot didn't quite go as planned, so the photographs that I've got here to share are the ones that were taken in day 2. The Hasselblad files are the ones beginning with the B, and the Leica files are the ones beginning with L. So the Leica M11 with the 50mm lens and the Hasselblad with the 80mm lens. I've had to crop the Leica photographs, and you'll see here how much crop I've had to do. 50mm photo that you get from the Leica, and then you also have to crop it down into a 4:3 format, which is the same as the Hasselblad, and that way we get a similar framed photograph for both the Leica and also the Hasselblad. So hence everything is in 4:3 and the perspective is about the same. Let's have a look at the first 2 photographs. In this case here, shooting at f11 with both shots. I didn't try and get the color balancing quite exactly right. However, I have done a bit of exposure adjustment if necessary, just to bring them up about the same. If we look a bit closer in both images at f11, they are very similar. This is zooming in at 200%. Looking far in the distance, shooting, I did focus at infinity in both cases, and we can see there's a lot of detail. Now on the Leica side we've got 60 megapixel, on the Hasselblad side we've got 50 megapixel, but you have a larger format on Hasselblad and a slightly smaller format on the Leica. But is there enough difference? Well, yes, I think you can still see a little bit of difference at 200%. If you look really closely at the, say this house here and the fence railing, possibly you can see a bit more detail there. If you look at this barrier here and that barrier there, on the Hasselblad you can just define that a bit better than you can actually on the Leica. Is it the lens? Is it the sensor? Well, I think both lenses are great, so I suspect you have got that extra sensor size, and therefore you are picking up a little bit more detail with the sensor on the medium format compared to the Leica. But otherwise, we've got a pretty wonderful shot in both cases with a lot of detail. So it just shows how well the Leica is producing the results. What I did notice is that there is a difference in depth of field between the 2 formats. So an f11 on the Leica is probably more likely to f16, f22 as far as depth of field on the Hasselblad with the different format. Here's the next group of photographs, and let's have a look at what I mean by the depth of field being different for the different formats and different lenses. So we've got the Leica here and we've got the Hasselblad. Let's have a look at those side by side. So Leica on the left, Hasselblad on the right. The Leica is shot at f1.4. The Hasselblad is shot wide open at f2.8. I know a focus point was this little bit of plant here. So we'll zoom in on that and we can see that we've got the focus pretty much okay. I think there's a little bit more detail in the Hasselblad here, but what I wanted to see was what was the depth of field equivalent. And if we go to the background here, you can see that the depth of field and the bokeh or bokeh is very similar in both cases. So Hasselblad at 2.8 and the Leica at 1.4. Leica at f2, Hasselblad at f4. I've got a new focus point. Alright, so the common focus is somewhere around here on the branch. So I did actually refocus, I think. Right, so Hasselblad on the left and the Leica on the right. And yeah, so we've got a nice clear image here. I think the Hasselblad's got a little bit more detail than the Leica. Again, it's hard to tell, but it's so close. And you see that, again, the bokeh in the background is very similar, even though there's 2 f-stop difference in the combination. Same shot again, change of aperture again. So we've got Leica now at f8 and we've got the Hasselblad at f22. That 3 stops difference, and we'll see whether we can actually get the same depth of field with both scenarios. So have a look at the detail. The Leica on the left, the Hasselblad on the right. and zooming in at 200%, and you can see that both photographs are outstanding as far as detail is concerned and contrast. Both lens camera combinations are working outstanding. And if you look at the depth of field here, even across even though the log is in a slightly different plane, there's still enough depth of field here to pick up all the detail in both cases. Hard to tell the combinations. It's hard to tell the difference in the two combinations, the Leica versus the Hasselblad. Just Hasselblad is producing a wonderful result, and you can see that even the Leica M11 with the 15mm Summilux lens is what an outstanding combination and definition that it produces. Equivalent to that of a medium format digital sensor, obviously, in my opinion. If we look at the depth of field and the bokeh here, I guess the depth of field in this here, well, bokeh I suppose you call it as well, and you can see they're very similar now, with the Hasselblad here and the Leica on the left here. Still a little bit more detail here on the Leica, so it just shows you the level of bokeh that you can get with a medium format camera and the narrow depth of field that you also get with the medium format sensor. We'll go f4 on the Leica and we'll do f8 on the Hasselblad and compare the two there. Okay, what do we see? Similar bokeh in the background, similar depth of field, I think. As far as the detail is concerned, slightly more detail on the Hasselblad, but otherwise really good. Look, yeah, in the cord here you can see a bit more compared to the Leica on the left. You can see it in the sand here. There's a bit more detail in the sand, more clarity in the sand compared to the Leica with this shot. Okay, next shot. So we got Leica on the left and the Hasselblad on the right. So my focus point is the railing here in both cases. Again, this is zooming in at 200%, and it's so hard to tell the difference between the two photographs. They are both at 5.6, which means that the Hasselblad is going to be more sensitive to the focus point, being a narrower depth of field at the same aperture. So if there's a little bit of lack of detail here compared to the Leica, it's probably because of the focus point being in a different location. But otherwise they're very similar. The ship is slightly out of focus, more so than with the Leica, again because the depth of field is narrower on the Hasselblad. Here's an unusual shot. After I took the shot and looked at it in Lightroom, then I noticed this rock here. Does that look like a shark head to you? Two eyes, a nose, and its mouth here with its teeth along its mouth? I just called this one Shark Rock. Didn't even know it existed, but now I do. I wonder how many other people see that image in the rock. Let me know. Comment. Alright, so I was focusing on this rock here in both cases, but when I look closer, that rock is slightly out of focus on the Hasselblad, and also this rock in the foreground. But if I come across to the side here, I notice there's a real strong focus point there, and that rock there, that one there, is basically right smack in the middle of these two rocks. So that's my focus point, is that actual rock there, whereas my focus point on the Leica is a bit further back. So both at 2.8 here, and again we know that now that the Leica is going to give us a greater depth of field than the Hasselblad at this aperture. So, but you know, when you get to the focus point, you get a lot of detail here on the Leica, and also you also get a lot of detail here on the Hasselblad, but just got much narrower depth of field. And do a side by side. So we got the Leica at f16 and the Hasselblad at f22. Alright, the light is dropping quite a bit, so already we're shooting at 1 second for the Leica, and I suspect that the Hasselblad, Hasselblad was probably around that 1 second, 2 second mark. I can't remember exactly, but anyway, so the background there is nice, and a lot of movement in the water. You still got more detailed, more depth of field with the Leica compared to the Hasselblad, which is okay, we're well defined now, we know that. But we've got the depth of field to be much stronger now in the foreground, so we've got both this back rock as well as the front rock there more in focus. As soon as you go to medium format, there's going to be a difference in depth of field for the same aperture setting. So you're going to have to go up a couple of stops to get a similar depth of field compared to full frame sensor. The quality of the M11 is outstanding with the 50mm Summilux lens, almost on par to the medium format of the Hasselblad and the CFV 50C sensor, the 50 megapixel medium format sensor, which is about 1.5 times larger than that of a full frame sensor. Back in the studio, and I guess I have to come up with some observations of my experience. Having the digital back makes a big difference to shooting something completely new, and you know, shooting the Hasselblad for the first time. I haven't even put a roll of film through here yet. Shooting medium format digital on the Hasselblad was definitely a new experience. One of the first things, and I've just put a bit of plastic here on top so you can actually see, the digital frame is quite a bit smaller than the 60 by 60 millimeter frame of film. So you're getting a lot less than what you would get as far as the film format is concerned. Because we're using a lot smaller area, it means we're only using part of the lens, and therefore the whole dynamics of the lens changes as well. So the 18mm would normally be 50mm or maybe a bit less, 45mm focal length in full frame format, but because we're using a crop sensor, it reverts back the other way to about 60-65mm. So that's an observation there. The other thing was, what I did notice in shooting wide open on this at f2.8 to get the same depth of field was equivalent, was shooting 1.4 on the 50mm Summilux. At this stage I'm not ready to part money to buy the digital back. I will shoot some film and then scan the film and then see what sort of results I get with that now that I'm a bit more familiar with the body itself. What it did also highlight was just the convenience of using the Leica M series camera. It's with its form factor so easy to handle, being compact and everything, whether it's handheld or whether it's on a tripod. Having the Arc Swiss mount here with the optional handle on the M11 also made it really easy to set up the camera, put it on the tripod, take the shot. There was just absolutely no comparison with the ease of handling to be able to get the shot as quickly as possible before the light changes. The quality of the images were similar. Yes, you can, in some cases the Hasselblad gave you maybe a different image, but sometimes I got a better shot with the Leica as well, so it's not really a one-to-one comparison as far as which is a better shot and which gives you the better image. I think in this case here, my first experience was just the ease of handling. The Leica was definitely a winner, but you know, I love the form factor of the Hasselblad as well, and I want to shoot some film and get that full resolution image. And scanning, you know, that will be my next task. Anyway, I found this, you know, this was a really, I suppose, from my perspective, an educational process. And hopefully you found this interesting as well. But anyway, if you did, then give it a thumbs up. That's how you support the channel. Really appreciate your help. So if it's the first time to my channel and you haven't already subscribed, then please do subscribe, press notifications, and you'll be notified when the next video is out. Thanks again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Cheers, bye.